I chose for the final to focus my research on the war, the 100-year war that Israel has posed on the Palestinian people. The topic of my presentation is War on the Nation of People, Refugees Within Their State. Introduction. Understanding the history of Palestine is critical to the present day events that are occurring, in which some Arabic and American journalists state is a genocide. From a historical approach, this paper considers the history of the establishment of Israel in Palestine. Some factors contribute to provoking an undercast of media and propaganda response to the ongoing war on Palestine. Factors such as how Jews became citizens in Palestine, which was implemented through colonial subjugation, an important feature of this long war, one which has been distorted, has been the Palestinian continuing resistance against heavy odds to what amounts to one of the ongoing attempts at colonial subjugation in the modern world. Stigmatizing much of their resistance as terrorism has successfully occluded the real history of the past 100 years in Palestine. The British government in the United States and Israel have used metric tactics to expel and kill Palestinians. Hence, the Palestinian people's lives are expendable for Israel to become a state. Examining expendable lives. Most of the post war assessments focus predominantly on an enormous civilian death toll and injured persons, especially children, as well as the massive destruction to homes, factories, public, governmental buildings, and infrastructure. Indeed, the numbers speak for themselves. 1.8 million people trapped in a small coastal enclave of 365 square kilometers, mercilessly bombarded from the air, land, and sea by the sixth strongest military in the world with no means of escape. Over 20 over 2,200 Palestinians were killed, 77% of which were civilians, including 521 children and 297 women. According to the report by Al Mazin Center for Human Rights, at least 999 of the casualties were killed in their own homes, including 329 children and 212 women. An additional 233 people were killed in the vicinity of their houses, many of whom were fleeing their homes as a result of the attacks by the Israel military. In July 2014, the Israel state launched a catastrophic war on Palestine. This resulted in thousands of Palestinian deaths. The Palestinian lives are expendable and can be killed, while the lives of Jews are valuable. Jason Dillon, in his book Living and Dying on the Migrant Trail, goes into depth on the concept of whose lives are expendable, hence migrants. Jason Dillon reviewed migrants seeking to cross the Mexican-Arizona border through deterrence that leads them to the desert of death. South. Dillon demonstrates how the state decides how migrant lives are expendable and how prevention through deterrence policy has allocated death as a deterrence for migrants entering the United States. The statement from this official document suggests both that early on in the planning of this policy, the migrant death rate was considered a useful metric to gauge the program's effectiveness, and that the Border Patrol clearly understood that fatalities will rise as enforcement in urban areas forces aliens to attempt mountain or desert crossing. Likewise, the British government in the United States and Israel have used matrix tactics to expel and kill Palestinians. The cost of being colored. The continuous war on Palestine started in 1917 and is ongoing to date. In the 20th century, Southern Africa and Nigeria encountered settler colonial wars similar to those in Palestine. The intruders who sought to settle and colonize Southern Africa and Nigeria were Europeans. The appearance of the white race showing up in countries so they can settle or colonize where people of color live is an ongoing historical reality. There, Israel has been extremely successful in forcibly establishing itself as a colonial reality in a post colonial age, as it whitewashed its rich colonial legacy. At the same time, it has always assumed a pietist and utterly false posture of self defense, while almost always being on the offense. The historian and theoretician of colonialism, Patrick Wolf, wrote, settler colonials are premised on the elimination of the native societies. The split tensing reflects a detriment feature of settler colonization. The colonizers come to stay. Invasion is a structure, not an event. Theoretical framework. For this research, the framework that I decided to focus on was necroviolence. Necroviolence is a consolidation, he argues, does not adequately account for ways that death and the right to kill or let live are exercised in contemporary forms of political power. Moreover, more generally, rather than seeing politics as simply a project of autonomy and the achieving of agreement among a collective through communication and recognition, Mbembe calls the pessimistic acknowledgement that increasingly the political is masked as war, resistance, security, or the battle against terror. Each one of these endeavors make the murder of the enemy its primary and absolute objective. Necropolitics, or killing in the name of sovereignty, is not about abstract notions of reason, truth, or freedom. The theoretical framework of necroviolence is essential for understanding and conceptualizing the ongoing war on the Palestinian people. Since the 1917 Balfour Declaration of Israel's power in Palestine, the Palestinian people have lost a massive amount of land, political rights, history, status, livelihood, family, and friends due to war. There is no understanding of settler colonialism unless there's power and super for such events to occur. I decided to share a video from Al Jazeera news source. It is a contextual review of Palestine and Israel ongoing war. The question of asylum and refugee. The Palestinian people are refugees within their own country, seeking asylum. Unlike the Zionists who came to Palestine and started a war on the Palestinian people for land and power of control. In order to better understand the reality of war and its aftermath for the people of Gaza, one needs to place the recent war on Gaza in its proper historical and political context. A decontextualized view of the post-war conditions in Gaza, when seen merely as humanitarian crisis with miscarried attempts at quantifying human suffering through war statistics, does little to capture the catastrophic experience of the people of Gaza. During British rule of Palestine in the early 1900s, Jews went from 10% of the population to 30% of the population in Palestine and over 6% of land. In November of 1947, the UN voted to divide Palestine, establishing 55% of the land for a Jewish state. With the Zionists now taking over Palestine, they used their military forces to seize more land and reduce the Palestinians in it. They began forcing residents out and used means of violence such as bombs to have their way. In April of 1948, 250 Palestinians were killed in Yessen through inhumane tactics that resulted in 250,000 Palestinians fleeing for their lives because of fear in May of 1948. The media. The power of narration. In the broader American political and public sphere, however, the Palestinians continue to be deleted from the historical record. In the words of Edward Said, they have been denied permission to narrate. Not only is their perspective rarely represented, but it remains largely defined in the public mind by those who wish them ill. When the Palestinians are allowed to appear on a stage in public forums or in the media, in the U.S. context, this is usually carefully balanced with the opposing point of view. Needless to say, such balance is not required when Israeli perspective is put forward. Mobilizing fear. The power of the media has a narrative of Israel's war on Palestine has been disappointing. However, with social media being a means of resource of news, the current Israel war on Palestine has shifted the narrative. Thus, social media has become a new way of mobilizing shame. Our power is primarily the power of mobilizing grassroots people to speak out. The mobilization of shame is one way to put it. The eyes of the world shining on the prisons into the dark corners of police stations and military all over the world to try to bring international pressure to bring upon governments which are committing human rights violations. Thus, Israel's prime minister is aware of the media influence, but has continued the war on Palestine to date. This brings the next critical point on the media influence. In Kenya's essay, the wave announces it performs, it enacts, and there is no hiding here. Nothing in the dark, nothing to be ashamed of. And it demonstrates this for the very instrument that are known for their revelatory abilities. The wave says, expose this. This is I am exposing for you. Hence, Israel is performing a genocide in front of the world and waving in front of the camera. Conclusion. Thus far, this paper main research finding has been a history of how Palestinians became refugees in their land. It is clear that what has been going on in Palestine for a century has been completely mischaracterized. The long war on Palestine should be seen in a comparative perspective as one of the last major colonial conflicts of the modern era, as the last one devoted to the establishment of a colonial settler state in the non-European world. Moreover, the Palestinian people continue to live in an apartheid committed by the Israelis. According to the UN, apartheid is also a crime against humanity, as set out both in 1973 International Convention of the Suppression and Punishment of the Crime, in 1998 Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. It consists of three primary elements: an intent to maintain domination by one racial group over another, a context of system oppression by the dominant group of the marginalized group, inhumane acts, forcible transfer. Lastly, according to the United Nations, New York, October 2022, there is no reasonable grounds to conclude that the Israeli occupation of Palestinian territory is now unlawful under international law due to its permanency in the Israeli government de facto annexation policies. According to the first report to the General Assembly issued today by the United Nations Independent International Commission of Inquiry on the Occupied Palestinian Territory, including East Jerusalem and Israel. Thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoy the YouTube video. It's worth a while.